All right, we're rolling. Well, welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
I'm Chris Clements.
And today,
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we are honored to have Lisa James as our guest. Lisa and I have known each other a while. I was actually
A long time.
Yeah, I was trying to think when did we meet?
That's a good question. Probably around 2000.
Yeah. So that's been a while. It's hard to believe it, how long ago that is.
I appreciate you bringing that up.
We were both very young. We were all children at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And you were involved with George W. Bush's campaign.
Yes.
And it happens to be his birthday yesterday.
2 days ago.
Right?
2 days ago.
2
Yeah.
days ago.
Happy birthday.
I saw you wishing him a happy birthday.
Happy
did.
birthday, W.
I did wish him a happy birthday.
And I did as well.
Tell us, how did that come about? I mean, I think that's a pretty interesting story. You were, a key player in both campaigns here in Arizona for him.
It was a lot of fun. I'm really fortunate, and it really goes back, now you make me date myself even further, back to 1988 when I met my husband when I was working on a local campaign in Illinois. And he came in as an advance representative for George Herbert Walker Bush, the first President Bush. And I was the local host committee coordinator. And we put on a great rally right after the first one, right after the convention. And it was fabulous. And I met my future husband. So that all worked out well. We got married, lived in D.C. through the administration, moved back here where my husband's from, to Arizona, and I kind of took a break and had a lot of kids. And then they called and said that Governor Bush was going to look to run for president, and would we help out? And of course, that was an easy answer to say yes. So we started working. I think we did an event here. I think one of the first fundraising events in the country was here in Arizona. Had a great event with Jim Simmons and Jim Click co-hosting. They were the finance co-chairs.
It probably had to do with Jim Click.
Yes, and had a great event. And even more fun, to make things full circle, the fundraiser came in, and her name is Beth Sturgeon, and she was super excited, and we were putting on this event. And she was also a little nervous. This was a big event and running for president. And she mentioned that her boss was going to be coming in, and it turned out to be someone that I had worked with on the 88 victory campaign in Missouri, who turned out to be her boss and a big part of the campaign and is a dear friend to this day. And so, things come full circle. At the time, he was working for a senator from Missouri, and they were office next to the victory campaign in 92. And that's how we had originally met. And here he comes strolling in as the finance director for the Bush campaign. So it's a small world in politics.
World. Yes, it is.
Anyway, so the campaign got going. It was an interesting time to be a Bush person in Arizona because, as you'll recall, Senator McCain was also interested in being the president of the United States. And so it was an interesting introduction to Arizona politics. We'd attended a few events, but really I had been focused on a little bit of our business and a whole lot of having kids.
Yeah, I remember that time a little bit. I mean, having known John McCain a good portion of my life, but wanting to support then Governor Bush, it wasn't really an option at that time.
There were a few people who came out, Governor Hull
Yeah.
and Sheriff Arpaio, and some other notables along the way. And I met a lot of great people that I'm still friends with to this day from that campaign. Time went on, and he became the nominee, and then I got introduced more so to the state party here and became the victory director. And we actually shared office space with Senator Kyle's campaign, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. I guess it was 2006 when Kyle was up for re-election, and he was nervous.
I remember that
because
campaign.
it was Jim Peterson, wealthy developer, was running against him, spending millions.
And Jim was hammering him on all sorts of
things. And Peterson spent, I think, $13 or $14 million, which was absolutely unheard of.
Yeah.
At that to hit. We'd never had that kind of money spent on a Senate race in Arizona at that point. It seems like such a small amount of money compared to today.
Today.
Mark Kelly raised $100 million. Just doesn't seem possible. But that was an intense campaign because you had the governor's race. Len Munsell had been nominated over Don Goldwater, and Napolitano was running for re-election. So you had Napolitano running as the Democrat governor, and then Kyle up in 2006, which was not a great year.
It was a terrible
for
year.
Republicans because, the midterm after a general, presidential election, and Bush had been reelected, and things were starting to go south on Iraq and the war and people getting frustrated. So we worked a lot. And so Lisa and I worked pretty closely together that year. We shared an office.
Yeah. Share an office with like 3 other people
Mike
in
Haller
a little bitty space.
And one of my most memorable screaming matches in politics happened in that office.
I recall that. I stepped out of the office for that.
Oh, do tell.
Well, it was...
if you're going to bring it up, you need
so
to
running
talk
for
about it.
re-election that year was Congressman J.D. Hayworth.
Sure.
And he was running against Harry Mitchell, who had been the mayor of Tempe for years and was the state senator from that area at the time. And J.D., I think, felt like he'd gotten the short end of the stick when it came to redistricting a few years earlier, and somehow I was to blame for that.
Oh, okay.
And he let me know
Okay.
that it was all my fault. And that's the only time I've ever been in a conversation in which I've had spittle land on my face.
Really?
I hid.
You left the room.
It was an intense time. And Hayworth ended up losing pretty narrowly. We didn't know the results for a number of days after, right?
No, it was close. And I remember, I think at the time, let's see, my son would have been about 12. No. Yes, 10. He was 10. And he and his football buddies came in, and this is when we still actually did some stamping of mail.
Yeah, we
Believe
actually had
it
to
or
touch
not.
it, right?
We actually touch it, make phone calls, and
Handwrite it.
that kid
On occasion.
was super interested in that race because he had put mail, been involved in it, and for days while we were waiting for the, determination. Did J.D. Hayworth win? It's like, no, unfortunately, it did not.
Did not work out.
It beat the Obama conversation though when he same child said, "Do we have to move to an apartment now?"
Because the sky is falling.
That means you're raising them well. So,
Yeah, they get it.
so tell us about being a woman in politics. You've been a mom. You've been at the highest levels of the political echelon with presidential campaigns. I mean, how have you balanced all that? How have you looked at your life and said, "This is how we're going to make it work"?
Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And my kids will tell you there are times where poor kids would come in and it'd be like the month where you had to track your nutrition and they'd have to write down what they had for dinner. It was like pizza. It's election season. We eat pizza. They got to do a lot of great things as a result of our involvement in politics. And we were super fortunate and produced the White House Easter egg roll for 8 years. And when it was over, my youngest daughter was an infant, like 3 weeks old for the first one. And by the end of it, when it was over, she said, "What are we going to do on Easter?" I said, "Go to church like everybody else."
You're not going to the White House.
That has ended.
In fact, in your office, you have some of those posters. And I
We do.
remember when you and I got reacquainted several years ago, and I'm looking at one of those posters, and I looked closely, and I said, "This is the one where Hannah Montana played with the
Yes.
Jonas Brothers." I know because I was there. with my then 5-year-old.
The James kids had some influence on who we should invite for the entertainment, and Hannah Montana and the Jonas Brothers were top of the list.
We were talking about Hannah Montana in another podcast.
Yep.
She's changed a little since then.
She's changed a little, yeah. But the Jonas Brothers are still around, and
They are.
they seem to be doing all right.
They do. It was, we had some great experiences. I will tell you, there were often times where, it was, I would be the only woman in a room in politics. I was super grateful when I got here and met people like Lisa Atkins and Kim Wold and Karen Taylor Robeson, Becky Burnham, some people that really were engaged and part of that political process. Connie Wilhelm, and we did some great things. We actually were all inspired, I think, to get more women involved. We held a huge event together that benefited the state party. Can't remember what year it was, but I think we had over 1,000 people, and it was just dedicated to engaging women in politics. And it's important. I think that times have changed a lot. There are more women, and Arizona's super interesting. So when we moved out here, I thought, this would be really boring. It's Arizona. It's red as red can be, and there's nothing really going on. I mean, it's great. It was great. It's freedom. It was exciting to come to a conservative state where people were like-minded, and the battles were really, a lot of them in the primaries. Things have changed since then. Demographics have changed, and voter trends have changed, and it's been nothing but interesting, to put it mildly, since then. It was not the boring state I thought it was going to be. A big part of me wishes it was.
Yeah.
But it's been an incredible experience, and I'm really thankful for some great women that I've met along the way and have become lifelong friends that are a big part of the political process here. And Arizona's done some great things. I mean, Arizona's led from the beginning. I mean, from Sandra O'Connor to having the year that we had all women holding the constitutional offices of Arizona, right, even if one was a Democrat. Right. Turned out okay in the end when she left early. But so there are, while we lead here, there's still a lot of work to be done, though, and that's why I've put my heart and soul and volunteer time into a program called the Doty London Excellence in Public Service Series.
Tremendous program.
And then also I brought my handout with me for Maggie's List, which also is a national program that supports Republican women at the federal level. We do endorse statewide offices in the states, but it's really primarily more for the federal level.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Arizona really has had some phenomenal women leaders, and I think it kind of, to some degree, goes back to, Arizona allowed women, in the Constitution, women could vote before they could nationally.
They could, and then they couldn't,
right,
so that we could become a state.
Then we changed Constitution right back. But you mentioned Sandra Day O'Connor, and what an inspiration she has been, for decades, to so many men and women and men, I should say. But you mentioned Lisa Atkins and Kim Wold, and when you think about, there were, we've had, not only we had a number of women elected officials, but we've also had really strong women in positions of power, more behind the scenes. Kim was, Kyle's top aide for years. Lisa Atkins was chief of staff for Bob Stump, and they really, the two of them, I'm glad you mentioned them, because they really have mentors' hearts. They are phenomenal people. They've been there for me from the very, very beginning.
I can totally concur with that, especially when it comes to Lisa Atkins. So I'm literally 23, 24 years old. I'm pounding the pavement in Washington, D.C., and my base of operations, as I'm trying to find a job on Capitol Hill, fresh out of college, is Bob Stump's office. And basically Lisa telling me, just go in his office and make your calls and do whatever you need to do. And one time, I think we've talked about this. One time, he comes in with like some folks from out of town, and I'm in there at his desk using his phone, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, Chris. We'll stay out here." I go, "Whoa, no, time out." But she was, in terms of mentorship, she was tremendous for me because she kind of kept me focused on the what Washington was versus what it isn't, what the opportunities are for somebody like me versus what they're not. And she was great. And we've had, I think your point is great. I mean, there's been so many strong women. I mean, on both sides. I mean, are tremendous people, tremendous leaders who've made a difference for Arizona.
Definitely.
Whether you agree with them or not agree with them. I consider Ann Kirkpatrick. I mean, I don't agree with everything that Ann, is for or not, but I love her. She's just a sweet, nice lady all the time when I meet with her. Not a Republican, but she embodies that sort of spirit.
Yeah.
I think.
A lot of great women out there. Brenda Burns.
Yeah.
Just so many over the years that have really been super receptive of building a network of women that can reach out to each other. I mean, certainly they let the men call them too, but they really there's been in a competitive environment that politics can be and is. They've been really great to work with and to build people up, and that's what the Dodie London program is about. It's about education, but it's also about creating this network of women across the state. It's not just Maricopa County. We've got women from Mojave County down to Cochise to Yuma to all across the state who have gone through this program, and they know when they have a question or they need help with something, they can reach out to any and say hi, even if they've never met, because now the program's been going for 10 years. We've got over 100 graduates, and they can call and say, "You don't know me, but I'm a Dodie class of," and it just opens that door. And speaking, I mean, the reason it's named the Dodie London Excellence in Public Service Series is after the first and for a long time the only woman to have ever chaired the Arizona Republican Party, Dodie London.
Yeah. It's fantastic. What you've been an astute political observer and an insider and a participant in the process. What are the things that, what would you say are the biggest changes you've noticed dating back to
1988?
1988 to now?
Oh my gosh. Philosophically or how we do campaigns or?
Well, maybe it's, how we do campaigns. I think that's a good question. I mean, I think you have good insight on that.
The first job I had was for a state senator in Illinois, and it was a government job. I was his district director. It's a little different than in Illinois than how it is in Arizona. And they would send us a press release. They'd send me like 20 copies of a press release that they'd written in Springfield and mail it to me with black and white pictures, and then I would mail them to the newspapers and to, not the pictures, but the press release to the radio stations, and that's how we got media, which is a little different than how it works today, where anybody
Twitter.
with an iPhone or any smartphone can be a reporter themselves.
Right.
And the commentary, yes, was we get some angry letters, but not, it'd be a few a day, not 100 an hour on whatever you happen to be doing at that moment. So social media, I think, has changed everything. I mean, my goodness, we don't even, because it went from that to fax machines. I mean, I remember the first computer system, the finance system I got to do reporting for campaign contributions, and it used a disk that was like a 12 by 12. Just all kinds of things have changed since then. But, the fact that, and you'd get a piece of paper with your phone list on it and have people, literally dial up. And we were still doing that in the 2000, 2004 campaigns, picking up the phone and looking up a number that you had printed out and filling in a bubble of what they said their answer was and then feeding it through a computer, which we thought was super advanced. And now, you pick up the phone, it's already connected to the person you're calling. It's all done on your phone. You don't even have to go anywhere to do it, which I miss a little bit of.
Right.
I think there's a energy that comes from a bunch of people piling into a campaign office and being part of that whole system. And not that there still aren't campaign events to do and that can build, but I think phone banks are kind of something I, believe it or not, miss.
I do. I've always been a big believer in phone banks. That was how John Shaddy won his first election in 1994. Was we set up the garage and we brought in dedicated lines. We had 13 or 14 phones, and we just staffed that thing every night and made phone calls. And that made the difference for him. And there is the energy, the buzz from just the hum, what I called the phone bank hum. And we've lost a lot of that because of the ability to do things remotely. In fact, I think it was it to the 2004 campaign where and I think it was Bill Gates set up he was the E.
He was our go figure. Wait, your name is Bill Gates. You must be in charge of our electronic communications.
And it set up these house parties, and then you kind of electronically were a precinct captain or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
we had names for them.
But I remember thinking, wow, I can do this stuff from home, and kind of changed everything. So
it did. It's come a long way, but but you've really developed relationships with people that would even just come in for your phone banks. I had a guy who came in. His name was Myron. You might remember him, and he came in every 4 times a week, and he was a member of the union, and he was LDS, and he had all these interesting things about him. And he would come in very consistently, and he made call after call after call, and we tracked him, and you could get prizes for, or we'd reward you with something for your calls. And eventually, the president was coming to town, and I said, Myron's got to be a greeter. The man's made more calls than anybody, and he's got such a unique background. So president arrived, and Myron got to meet him, and they got their picture, and they mail you your picture, and then he was really dedicated. He came back every night, and he had framed his picture, and he would bring it with him. He would stop at Subway on his way, and he would have his Subway sandwich, and he would come in, and he had his phone area he liked, and he'd put his picture up, and he'd get his Subway out, and he'd start calling. And I was like, if I could duplicate you.
Yeah.
But that sort of embodies kind of what remains the same, I think, in politics, and that is you need people like that on your campaign, regardless of the technology that exists. I mean, you need people like that who are that dedicated, who feel blessed in some way by a simple contact with the candidate and feel a connection, and who run through a brick wall for that person.
I think there's one rule that hasn't changed, and if somebody says and I actually registered him to vote before we had an office. He came in to the state party, and I was there because I've done a lot of interest. I have been very privileged to go to some amazing events and meet amazing people and be in some really interesting situations. I have also picked up trash with my bare hands off the courthouse lawn in Prescott, where the prisoners that were sent over to do the same had rubber or gloves and little pickers. No, my hands. So I've done, and I think that you need to do that in a campaign. You need to not ask someone to do something you're not willing to do. You need to do everything along the way and do all the building blocks, but you also need to tell people you appreciate them. And if they come in and they want to do something, then you need to have something for them to do, because they're going to go find, they're yearning to be part of it. And if you don't give them a way to be part of it, they're going to go do it for someone else.
Well, and be a part of it in a meaningful way. I mean, that's busy work. Volunteers don't like busy work. They want to actually make a difference. And I think that's why I love phone calls, because that is that is one of the most important parts, is that personal interaction with voters. Absolutely.
I think one of the things that I've tried to, and my husband is 1,000 times better at this than I am, but and it's one of the things that really made me fall in love with him right away, is not just as a person, and became my husband, but in politics, is He made everybody a part of that event feel like if you didn't do whatever your job was, even if it was taking out the trash, the whole thing was going to fall apart. Everything depended. I really need to stop talking with my hands. Everything depends on you doing your part and doing it well, and it's all the parts are important. So
Yeah, that's a great point.
What do you, I mean, in today's environment, fast forward to today's environment, you have a lot of interaction, I'm sure, with first-time candidates.
yes.
Candidates who have this dream of becoming congressman or state senator or whatever. How do you see that now? Like, what do you see that's missing from a lot of folks who want to run for office and yet maybe don't have what it takes?
I think a lot of people decide they want, they're interested in running for office, but they don't understand the political system at all. What's a precinct committeeman? What's the state party? What is their role? What are they supposed to do? Who do they speak for? I think a lot of people think they're a member of the party, or they're part of the party because they've registered Republican, and that is true. But to really be, I think if you can engage them in what it means to be a precinct committeeman, and this is changing too, because I think the role of the party has drastically changed over the years, and their influence has changed. But for them to understand what it means to go to a legislative district meeting or a county meeting, and what it means to go out and collect petition signatures, I think, depending on what you're running for, it can be an awesome task to go out, and especially for a statewide race or even a congressional race, the number of signatures that you're required to collect and the contributions. And I think oftentimes I'll hire a fundraiser and it'll be fine, and they don't realize that the people that are going to give you money want to talk to you, not your fundraiser.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I think with social media, people are. I talk to for some reason I talk to a lot of first-time candidates who somehow get my number, and nobody really understands why they're running. It seems like they get caught up in social media and the talking points of the day, and they really haven't thought through the work. The real work.
what it
that
means,
takes.
if you're successful, now you have to go do this job.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, not just being successful, like just the work of putting together a campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Like the party's not going to put together your campaign.
No.
The consultants will probably hijack your campaign, and then you'll be in the poorhouse because you've given all your money to them, and you're just a number to them. And so, I mean, they haven't done the work themselves, like in themselves and understanding what it takes to really work a campaign.
I think some of the best advice I've given to people that have come to me and said, I want to run for office, is going through that series of questions and then saying, maybe you should go try X, Y, and Z, and then think about this in 2 years or in 4 years. But, go develop some of this structure more and think about, one of the things I still tell every candidate to do is go home and write down everybody that you can remember that you've ever met in your life, that you have any sort of ability to reach out to, whether it's your first grade teacher or someone on the family from your kid's little league team or whatever it might be. And can you call them? Would they vote for you? And how much money will they give you?
Yeah.
And then cut that in half because you're dreaming.
Yep.
And then do you think you can wage a campaign?
Right.
I think John Kyle has one of my favorite lines where he said, money doesn't buy everything, but have you ever tried to buy anything without it? And campaigns take money.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lots of money.
Lots of money. What's your favorite memory of President Bush?
Oh gosh, a lot of great memory. Well, first, which one?
Well, W.
W.
Yeah.
I would say some really tender moments that I was able to see that I don't think the rest of the public got to see, where we'd be backstage and they'd bring in, for instance, a Gold Star family. And that wasn't something for the press to attend or even know was happening. Those were very off the record. And for him, and no staff, I mean, everybody was kicked out, and he spent time with those families. And, sometimes there wasn't a space for a lot of privacy, so it would literally be blue pipe and drape around them, and the time that he spent with them and the personal, feelings that you could see come across or hear come across or watch those families come out. And those were super tender and personal. And I wish more people, not for political sake, could have seen that, because they are very personal moments and they should belong to those families, but to know that that was a man who really did truly care.
Yeah. It is.
There's this public persona.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me how much and how quickly history has changed its mind about W, in the sense that he, when he left office, he was this failure as a president. Everyone was, Obama gets elected, blah, blah, blah. But, boy, when you think about how things have changed, I have Democrat friends who long for the days of W.
That's an interesting point. That's a really interesting
And I'm
point.
like, you called him the devil when he was the president.
Because when you
about?
consider the vilification of George W. during that time, even by members of his own party, which I thought was unfortunate, and quote unquote conservatives who didn't think he went far enough in a lot of policy, and some of that policy victories were realized under the last president in some ways, but the way President Bush conducted himself in the office and how he expected his staff to conduct themselves, I think was a great example. Because I know a lot of those people, and they're just stalwart, good, decent,
Loyal,
folks.
hardworking.
Tremendously loyal.
Yes. And really had the best interest of the country at heart.
Maybe other than Reagan, the most loyal staff that I've encountered in my short time in the political world. I mean, the George W. Bush staff is fiercely loyal to him.
I think that's a Bush family thing.
Yeah.
It comes from, their family. Their loyalty matters, and not in a good way. It was interesting to, who would think that you would work for two presidents in the same family and really relatively close together in the years, in the time span. It's the greatest honor of my life to have been part of that. And it's funny, I started out as a Jack Kemp volunteer in '88, and and
Also a great man.
yes,
That's what we have in common as well.
well, a little different though on the it was, but I'm forever grateful for both those opportunities.
Yeah. Well, people forget, like, Jack Kemp, for those of us growing up in the Reagan era, was like, he walked on water in terms of policy and tax policy, and then his role with George H.W. as housing secretary was maybe the most consequential housing secretary that we've ever had in terms of policy, in terms of enterprise zones and all these different conservative ideas,
Right.
how to get people into home ownership and the entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial capitalism. And you didn't hear housing directors talk like that in a presidential administration, but he was serious.
No, it was a lot of fun to see him again. Volunteered for him in '88. Flew on my own dime as a poor young. I think my first political job, I made $12,000 a year, and I flew to New Hampshire to be part of the whole. I just wanted to be part of it as a volunteer on my dime. Stayed in some house that the campaign had rented, where I woke up and some stranger was sharing my pillow. We were sleeping on the floor, and it was like an empty house with just people. You brought your sleeping bag and your pillow, and you went out and worked all day. And then to move forward, and in '92 I went and did the Missouri Victory campaign office, and my boss there was the state director, who's now a congresswoman, Ann Wagner, who was also a RNC co-chair at one point in time. And again, these relationships that I could still talk to her every once in a while, and and have these conversations, but we remember what it was like to be in the trenches. I think the difference is now, because people see so much more, that they think that they've, and not that you have to pay your dues, but you kind of have to pay your dues and know what you're getting for education purposes, to know what you're getting yourself into.
That is such a great point. I think that there's so many young people today that just think you can just leap to the big thing. You know, having knocked on doors and made phone calls, and I mean, for years I did that. And now, I mean, I remember I was helping with a statewide race not long ago, a few years ago, and a young lady came in. So the candidate, the campaign manager, those of us around him that were helping, we're all in the office making phone calls. She's probably 21 or 22 years old, and comes in. She's like, "Oh, I'm too important to make phone calls. That's below me." And I was like, "You've got to be kidding! The candidate is right there making phone calls.
Too important to make phone calls."
It was just astounding.
You obviously need a refresher course.
Yeah. Speaking of young people in politics, what advice would you give to someone in college or young person interested in politics and wants to get involved?
Volunteer and say yes to every opportunity you're offered, because you don't know where it will lead. I had zero interest in politics, actually. I got there accidentally. I went due to my high school history teacher, who was a Democrat, and we still chat to this day. I'm from a little bitty small town, and she told me I should apply for this Illinois government internship program. And you leave high school for a semester and you go to the Capitol and you intern. I wanted to be a nurse. I'm like, why would I do this? And I think she knew more about my family's political involvement and interest in politics at the time than I did, because I was a self-absorbed teenager. But I did it. I went because a friend of mine was going to do it, and I thought it'd be fun, and you get to leave my little town and go to the Capitol. And I went and I interned at the Illinois Alcoholism and Drug Dependence Association, because I thought it would be the closest thing to nursing that, was healthcare kind of related. And it was toward the end of my internship, and my boss there said, "You should go meet your state senator." I was like, okay. So made an appointment and went over to the Capitol and introduced myself. And he, I think this shows you that retail politics. He said, "Where are you from?" And I, "Salem, Illinois." "Who are your parents?" Roy and Sharon Woodward. "I know them. They've had fundraisers for me. Your dad's a precinct committeeman," all of these things. And I was like, oh, okay. It's still kind of whatever. And his office wasn't in the actual Capitol building. It was in the Stratton office building. And so the bell rang for them to go make a vote. And he said, "Do you want to come over?" And I have to go. "Do you want to come see what that's like?" And I said, sure. It was toward the end of the day. So I go with him, and we go on the floor of the Senate in the Illinois Capitol, and they started debating, and I was just like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. I must be part of it. Right. Changed my whole plans, changed my college I was going to, went to work for him. So Frank Watson, thank you very much for inviting me to watch you vote and changing my life. My parents were very distressed when I said, "I don't want to be a nurse anymore. I'm not going to go to St. John's School of Nursing. I'm now going to go into politics."
That's a great story. But it is, I think you're right. Not saying yes to every opportunity is really how it happens. It is the only reason I am where I am now. It's because just things that you just don't turn down, even if they seem beneath you, because one of the things that Chris and I have talked about is, and I think we talked about this last week, that the one thing is, as I look back now on my career, the importance of being kind to people, especially people that you might be over. Like when I was chief of staff and we had interns and staff assistants and all that kind of thing, I tried to be kind of everyone, because you never know who's going to end up, in a really important position, an elected official or, big time lobbyist or whatever.
It's funny you say that. So you said that very nicely. My husband says, the ass you kick today could be the ass you kiss tomorrow.
right.
Pardon my language.
No, that's great.
That's a much better way to say it.
But
We need that on a plaque.
Yeah.
I would put a quote board behind me sometimes during campaigns, and some of the quotes would be interesting. And oftentimes it was, the good you do may not be good for you. Because trying to remind yourself that
Yep.
there's a bigger, it may hurt you at the moment, but it's for a bigger purpose.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that idea of in today's social media vitriolic sort of culture of attack and then hide. That's what I would call it. You know, anybody on Twitter can have almost an anonymous handle and attack somebody and go hide. But eventually it comes back. It all comes back.
Well, they might make an opinion. Others make an opinion of you before they've ever met you. They feel like they know you from what they've read about you or a comment made. And then when you meet, they're like,
Oh, you're a lot different than I thought.
you do not have horns.
Yeah. You're not the devil.
Well,
I've had that experience many times, but
Well, you've been called the Prince of Dark Money.
Yeah.
And then we had, the Dragon Lady, Kathy Harrod, on here. So, I mean,
Another
and you
great
meet-
female
Yeah.
leader,
And you
Kathy.
meet Kathy for the first time, and you have all this. I mean, I was guilty of it. I had all these things in my head, and I'm like, you're like the nicest person I think I've ever met. So great. Let's do something.
Yeah,
yeah.
she's great.
And the grassroots politics part is such I think the basics are still the same. It's about relationships. It's about being kind. It's about working hard, and it's not taking yourself too seriously. I mean, the young people who take themselves way too seriously walk into a campaign are going to get their rears handed to them pretty quick.
Oh my goodness! And it's true, and you're going to make mistakes along the way. So this is one of my favorite campaign stories. It's 2000. I conned my neighbor and dear friend who I don't even know. You talk about how do you raise kids and do politics, and your husband goes for 6 months to Iraq during the middle of the Bush campaign, and my neighbor is it. I don't like to quote Hillary Clinton very often, but it does take a village when you're working in politics.
Madame Lafarge.
And my neighbor Cheryl is my godson, but I talked her into 2000 into working with me at the Victory office, and we planned this Victory bus tour, and they sent us these stickers, and I don't remember what they said, Victory, I don't know, something about Victory, and we were going to go on this bus tour, and we rented this bus, and at the time Victory, the dollars still flowed through the state party, so it's Nathan was the head of the party, and I said, we're renting this bus, and they sent me these stickers, and we put this giant decal on this bus, and we get done with our bus tour, and we come back, and it's time to take the sticker off, and it brings all the paint off of the bus. It was a brand new bus. This bus driver was having a heart attack. And I think poor Brenda Burns was in on that too. She'd gone on the bus tour, and we're like peeling this thing off, and the paint's just coming with it. And then I have to call and explain that I need thousands more dollars to repaint a bus. So there have been some not so great moments, and then there have been some incredible moments. Filling up Bank One Ballpark, which was what it was called at the time, for a debate watch party. I wore orange today for the Suns, by the way.
Good for you.
And I did notice that they're going to fill up. They have watch parties for the game when they're out of town at the arena. And I'm thinking, it just brought back, like, that's the political nerd I am. I have a watch party for a debate.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic.
That's great.
How do you look at politics going forward? Like, how do you look at, where we are as a country, obviously, is just we're in a crazy time. And what do you think needs to change? And then what do you think we need to own?
It's a sad time, actually. I think exactly what you're talking about, the social media has allowed, things to become very ugly. They've always been ugly. My husband reminds me, Civil War. We're not. It could be worse. But I think people need to remember these are humans, and they're most of them enter into the world, into the world of politics, whether you agree or disagree, they really think they're there to do better. And it's very easy to shout people down and comment that they're out to destroy the United States of America, or that they're not right enough, or they're not pure enough to be in politics. And I think in the end, we've driven people so far to the right, and equally the left has done the same, so far to the left, that until people find their way back to being able to realize that working together is the only way we're going to move forward, and not giving up your principles. I'm not saying that in the least, but figuring out how to work together to push things forward matters. And until I think that's what we need, some kind of return to civility. And not to say that I don't play hard, I don't play to win, but to do so without being mean. And I think we need that. But that's me. And
Yeah.
Good. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah.
find me.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to find me. But I would love for women who are interested in engaging in politics to go to dodilondon.com. It's a commitment to do that, but I think that they'll find that they have a great network of women to reach out to, and men. We do we include the other gender to come in and talk about what it means to be in politics. And
I got to speak to
yes,
some of your Dirty London folks. That was great. That was a great
you've done it before too. So, but I think that if you're interested in taking it, and it doesn't mean you're going to run for office. That's what I love about this program. It might be that you become someone's finance chair, or you might serve on a board or a commission. And heavens knows we need more people in those positions. We need people to start at the school board level, to start at city council, to really know and learn that process. Plus, we need good people serving in those positions. And so, and it might be that you want to run for Congress. I'm one who came in and said, I'm going to be president of the United States one day. And I said, I can't wait to see it. So I've had more than one say that. So one of them will do it someday. But to really go through this process, it's a big commitment. It's 10 months long. And but we cover everything. We try to cover how to raise money and stay out of jail, and how to run a campaign, but also how the government works. What's local government? What's state government? Subdivisions of government. So
awesome.
Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
thank you
They can find
so
us there.
much.
Yeah, thanks for coming in,
being here,
and sharing a little bit of your life with us.
It was
Appreciate
fun.
it.
I talk too much, so
That's why you're here, is to talk. Nobody wants to hear us just talk. Well,
I mean, the next person we need to have in is Gordon.
he would have a good time.
And then we can really get in the weeds.
He has some good stories.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a gentleman and a great man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Great. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
having me.